what you think might be a half-hour project, it might be an all-day project as you start to get into it. So it's just so hard to know. Rot is just, it's rotten to deal with.
Rot is rotten, Mike Curtin.
Welcome to the Fine Homebuilding Podcast, our weekly discussion of building, remodeling, and design topics aimed at anybody who cares deeply about the craft and science of working on houses. This is Senior Editor Patrick McComb. Today I'm joined by Fine Homebuilding Editorial Advisor Mike Gerton.
Hey guys.
Fine Homebuilding Editorial Director Andrew Zellner.
Morning, Patrick.
And our fine producer Jeff Rose.
Hi there.
Please email your questions to fhbpodcast@taunton.com. You can find previous podcasts and check out the show notes at finehomebuilding.com/podcast. Well, guys, thanks so much for being here this morning. It's a pleasure to see you.
Happy to be here.
Good to see you guys.
Mike, what time is it? You're in Arizona, am I right?
Yep, it's 7 o'clock here, and I've been up for 2 hours, so I try to stay on East Coast time a little bit, but it's only 2 hours difference. It's negligible, really.
Is your wife an early riser too, or do you have to tiptoe around the house to not wake her?
It all depends on the day. We used to do morning walks we'd leave at 5:15 or 5:30, but this week's been unusually cold for this area, southern Arizona. So it's been in the upper 20s, which even though if I was in New England, it would be like a balmy morning this time of year. But here, we say, well, let's walk in the afternoon. So I get up, she sleeps in a little bit. I do tiptoe around.
What will the high temperature be today during this cold snap?
Probably 56, 57, 58. So there are big swings in temperature when you're in a fairly dry climate in, interior U.S. Most people are used to that. So yeah, it's like springtime or fall in the Northeast where you have to plan your attire for the day accordingly, and have a pair of shorts and a T-shirt, in the back of the truck, but you start out with a jacket and a long pair of pants. So yeah, you got to be ready for that big temperature swing and the drier air.
Andrew, can I assume you're preparing for mid-50s today as a high?
Well, somewhat. We're going to the Builder Show next week, and so I've got to dig out my warm weather clothes, preparing for 50s in that way. But yeah, it'll be. It's actually supposed to get a little chillier than normal. It's sort of been like 20s, low 30s the last week, but we've got some sub-zero weather coming up. I think it starts maybe this weekend, and then it gets really cold while I'm in Las Vegas, which is fantastic.
I think the last time I was at the Builder Show in Las Vegas, it snowed briefly, which makes for driving very exciting, you can imagine, in Las Vegas.
And I don't think it's going to be warm by Las Vegas standards or anything, but it'll be a significant temperature swing for me, at least.
Mike, briefly, what have you been working on your place in Arizona?
I'm still working on my master bed remodel, or my main bedroom remodel. So I'm started hanging doors yesterday afternoon, and I realized something, and I'm going to throw out a question to you guys. Conundrum here. Old house, built in the late 70s. And when I put the new bedroom main door off the hallway, it closed itself. And it wasn't due to being out of plumb or square or anything. It's when the air-based heating system kicks on, it has a central return. And all of a sudden, kablang, the door shut when it got close to the jamb. And I realized I'm either going to have to put a really big door undercut or come up with some other transfer. So I was considering doing what, Patrick, I know you will cringe at, doing transfer grills, one low on the wall in the bedroom and one high in the hallway on the opposite side, and using the stud bay as the return chase. What do you think?
My only beef with that is noise, but if it's just you and your wife in the house, who cares, really? I mean,
Okay.
You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
It's
I
it's the
know it's
perfect
something
conduit
that's
for sound, so you wouldn't want to do that if you were going to have people,
yeah. I know
partying
it's
while you're
one of
trying to sleep.
those it's one of those things that a lot of HVAC it's not allowed by the code anymore. It used to be, panning and boxing stud and joist bays for
Even
running
on interior walls,
returns.
you're not allowed to do that anymore?
Oh, I'm 90%. I'd have to look up, but I'm pretty sure you have to have a fully, ducted if you're going to do it. Ducted system. You can't just use the drywall and the stud cavity as the chase. I mean, there's all sorts of things that can lurk in there, and can't really clean it out very well. But anyway, that's my next thing I got to work on today.
Um, so you're worried about stopping the airflow. It's not just a matter of the door closing by itself, am I right?
Yeah, it's blocking the airflow so that we freeze in the winter or get overheated in the summer when the conditioning system is running.
My
So
f-
I have to provide a balance. And I did a calculation, and I have to cut about an inch and 7/8 out of the bottom of the door, and that was a no go with my wife. So
Aesthetically.
yeah, aesthetically, yeah.
So I think it's Tamarack Technologies has a device made to do this very thing, right? How does she feel about the aesthetics of that?
Well, she said that would be fine, and all that really, it's called a return air pathway. I used them in the Pro Home 2016 house or the FHB house for doing the same thing, moving air without doing through between or the bedrooms and the central hallway for the central return without doing large door undercuts. And it's just two pieces, it's two grills, HVAC grills with a core of cardboard, which is just imagine corrugated cardboard stacked on edge and with all the holes, and that's what the air goes through, and it attenuates some of the sound. So that would be another option too. I was just
Sounds
looking for a
easier than
shortcut.
cutting a pair of registers and panning joist bays or stud bays.
Well, the stud bay is a stud bay. I would just cut the grill on one side and cut the grill on the hallway and cut the grill on the inside of the bedroom. So I might just order up that RAP from Tamarack.
I love that company. They make neat stuff. Andrew, what have you been doing?
I got to work on probably my least favorite activity, which is tracking down electrical issues in a car. So, and my garage is full of tools, so I did it in the driveway during winter. My hands just got like tore up, like with the cold, and so my driver's side front headlight, it was burned out, so I'm like, okay, cool, go get a new bulb doesn't work, swap bulbs with the other one, the new bulb worked in the other one just fine, so I'm like, okay, there's something going on here. Then I checked fuses and relays, all that's fine. Got out my multimeter, started tracing the headlight wiring, and it was like intermittent, but and so I spent probably an hour scabbing on another socket for the front headlight. Still didn't work, and and then I was like, all right, I think this is as far as I want to go, and I'll let somebody in a heated shop deal with it.
So that's where you're at?
That's where I'm at. Yeah, because we also only have one car, and so figuring out when we can do this, and then also when the shop has it opening, because there's still like, I feel like there's backlog and everything, and like scheduling time in a Minneapolis like auto shop is, you're looking at like a few weeks to a month out kind of thing.
And I've heard that consistently throughout the country. And
Yeah.
a part of it, I guess, is parts are hard to come by in many cases, and people have to fix their old cars because they haven't been able to get new ones or even new used cars. So, yeah.
Yeah, and like used cars have become exponentially like more valuable.
Crazy money.
Yeah.
Money. Jeff, you have anything to report?
I've been cleaning the basement. That's about it. So,
Well, looks great, Jeff.
I don't know how any of us
No.
could compete with that exciting occasion. But what motivated this? My guess is you were looking for something.
No, I was on the cusp of buying a new drill press, and that just got me down in the basement, and so.
A drill press for drilling what? What are you going to make?
Yeah, well, I need to do all my posts for my deck guardrail.
Awesome.
Eventually.
And yeah, so are you thinking a new used rig, or are you going to buy a whole new machine?
I'm thinking new.
Huh? Cool.
Have you guys seen the? It's been out for a few years now, but the Nova drill press. It's
Variable speed,
electronically,
right?
yeah, variable speed, electronically, like direct drive motor, like no belts. That looks pretty awesome. I mean, it's expensive, but I feel like any drill press you bought, 30 years ago had plenty of power and torque and like would stand up to like daily abuse. And like today, it's like hard to even like find those machines, let alone, buy a new one.
The used market is where to find that stuff,
Yeah.
right? And that stuff's also gotten very expensive owing to the pandemic, right?
Yeah.
So Jeff, are you going to buy a like $3,000 or $4,000 Nova drill press? As Andrew suggests?
Think not.
Their benchtop model, which is just as powerful as their floor model, is only like $1,200. But
Yeah, but I've got a little bench top that I'm trying to replace, which is fine for a lot of things, but not drilling through 4x4s.
Are you going to harbor freight or grizzly, or what's the plan?
Well, I actually, that's what started it. Is I got a coupon from Harbor Freight, so I thought, well, maybe I'll do that. And then I looked at the machine. It's like, yeah, maybe not. And then I started going back through the Fine Woodworking archives, and I've almost settled on the Delta.
Cool. Well, I hope to learn more about this and all the drilling, because that sounds amazing.
Could I ask a general drill press question?
Yeah.
How do you folks feel about radial drill presses?
We should tell folks what that is first.
So it's a drill press that's like mounted on a post that you can swing or tilt the head. And I didn't know drill presses were like available in any other way, because that's the drill press we had in our basement when I was growing up. And the flexibility of it for doing kind of like big things or like crazy things, you can like move the head and tilt it and like drill horizontally. It seemed pretty handy, but there's only like a couple places that are still making them, and I'm betting it's the same place overseas that's making them, and they're just available under a couple of brands. But I've always had a soft spot in my in my heart for radial drill presses.
So your dad bought this thing, and I'm guessing he got it new. Is that right?
Yeah. He worked at a lumber yard, and it had been sitting for a while, and he got a screaming deal on it. But he's used it for I'd say for all kinds of crazy stuff. But like now he's just he's really into turning, so he's like just drilling out blanks. So I'm trying to get him to think about like, maybe you can take my little benchtop one and but
it is the role of your children is to try and scam your tools, at least in my case. So that's part of our discussion for the after show is tool storage and organization. And for folks who are looking at the video version of the podcast, you may see behind me, I've been working on my wall of storage that I mentioned in a previous podcast recording in my library ladder. And I've had great enjoyment organizing the space and pulling out tools from the basement and consolidating them to mostly into one spot. And it brought to mind some tools that I haven't used in a while that I bought for special occasions. And maybe we can talk a little bit about that in the after show too.
Are you talking about like holidays and anniversaries, Patrick?
No, I'm
Special
talking
occasions?
like I had a single project and needed to spend some money instead of paying someone, right, to do
Yeah.
it. So it's I haven't figured out a way to give Carol tools for holidays. So we heard a little bit about Vancouver Specials, which was mentioned in podcast. I think it was 535 or 533, but this comes from Tim. A lot of these homes have poured concrete walkways around the exterior, and many I've seen has less than ideal drainage, as these were builder-grade homes that were fast-tracked in permitting to help with the housing crisis at the time. While they usually have large overhangs, Mike was correct. When it rains, it pours. I think we got 3 inches just the other day. That would be my first spot to look, especially with the letter writing noting cracks in the foundation. I think you all have spoken to this before, and if water is getting in, it's easier to stop from the outside. We did a similar renovation to my old boss's home in North Vancouver with a very similar foundation. We glued 3 inches of foam to the concrete foundation wall, glued drywall to that, filled the cavities with rock wool, and used a smart vapor barrier. Can't recall which one. It does require some dehumidification as his soil on the lot is all clay and does not drain well. Ask me how fun it was to dig the deck footings. Hope this helps. Tim. Did we give good advice, do you think, based on Tim's feedback to us? Yeah?
Mhm.
You guys have to remember this is an audio show, right? Okay.
Yeah, we gave fantastic advice.
Okay.
I was going to mention digging in clay is like something I get to do a lot. But digging, I put in an egress window, and I just dug the window well by hand with a shovel after work for like a week. But it was terrible. It was like completely awful. And I don't know if there are any like good strategies for digging in clay, or just like, just get after it.
Having grown up in Western Pennsylvania, which is all clay, I haven't found a good way to dig in clay, except to avoid it if you can, and if you have to, dry weather is better than wet, but that's also rare with clay soils for it to dry out. So, Mike, you have sandy soil, so I'm guessing you have little experience digging in clay.
Yeah, I don't know what it's like to dig in clay. And I forgot the name of the soil type in my area here in Arizona, but it actually digs better when it's wet. And I had to dig a stump out of a plant the other day, or the root ball of a plant. And I kept taking the wastewater from doing some tile work, and I poured it over the stump over the course of a day, and it softened the soil enough to dig in, because when it's dry, it's actually as hard as concrete, and you need a breaker hammer in order to dig anything. So I have no experience with clay. Is there any tool that you can use other than waiting for dry time to dig into it, like with a breaker hammer, like cut it up or break it up into clumps that you could get out easier, or do you just have to scrape at it with a shovel?
Oh, I'd say there's not an issue with like breaking it into
Wet.
smaller pieces. It's just like wet and sticky, and
Yeah.
you try to take a little bit, and it sticks to a bunch, and your shovel's off balance, and yeah.
Every once in a while, when I was, digging as a teen and early 20-something, I'd be digging in, wet clay soil, and the clay would stick to the shovel once in a while and want to take the shovel out of your hand when you go to toss it off the end,
Yeah.
which is pretty fun. Jeff, our soils are a mixed bag. What's around your house? I'm guessing it's ginormous boulders based on the local landscape.
Yeah, a lot of rock. Yeah, and kind of a clay loam mix. I grew up with a lot of clay soils. Like, if you wanted to do anything, you started with a 20-pound breaker bar. And
A post bar, I think, is what they call it.
Yeah.
Is super handy for digging in soil of all types, I would say. Great
Yeah.
for prying rocks and cutting. Cool.
yeah, glacial till.
So we heard from Will. Hey, folks, while walking in the woods today behind a 15-year-old development, it's just amazing the amount of building trash I find every time I walk there. I'm sure the wind took a lot of this stuff, but it's disappointing to see people just not caring at all that trash was blown off their job site and into the woods, further increasing the microplastics in our environment. Perhaps this is a reminder to be a little more conscious with our work. So Will sent a photo of garbage in the woods behind this development, which I'm sure is alarmingly common.
I see it all the time in new neighborhoods. It's just horrendous. It drives me nuts more than anything else, even though even beyond the quality of, or I should say, poor quality of some of the buildings going up that I see, but just all the trade contractors just throw everything in the dumpster, and there's no lid or tarp over the top of it. And on a windy day, all that stuff ends up strewn in the neighbors' yards or throughout the woodland surrounding the neighborhood.
Will's photo looked like there were shingle wrapper and insulation wrappers represented. I couldn't tell everything that was there, but it was clear it was a number of people making a mess.
And it's unfortunate that a large percentage of those construction materials, the debris, can be recycled in some way. Even the wrappers from a bundle of shingles, that's plastic film. And as long as you shake it out and it's dry, that can be recycled. Maybe not in a single stream recycling plant, but it can be brought to a facility. I know, at least in Oregon State, they're pretty, or I shouldn't, maybe not Oregon in general, but in Portland area when I worked there, they've been pretty conscientious. The builders that I know there have been very conscientious about separating all their material. They have the wood scrap in one pile. They have gypsum in another pile. They have plastic and cardboard in other piles. And then that all goes through a recycling process, which is good. It just puts less trash into just landfills.
I remember learning at one point how much trash is generated through construction and remodeling, and it is astounding. It is so much garbage. It is one of the biggest sources, as I recall.
Precisely.
Does Oregon or Portland have like a program that incentivizes that? Or
I'm not entirely sure if it's an incentivized program or if it's just a culture that's developed in the at least with the builders and remodelers I've met out there and worked with. It'd be nice to know more if there are programs around that communities have that either mandate or strongly incentivize recycling of construction debris.
because I think that's like the biggest issue is materials compared to like labor are still fairly cheap, and it's hard to justify the cost of having somebody on the payroll managing portions of that. But I do think it's an interesting idea to involve the manufacturers. Similar, like there are always bills about like limiting plastic bottles or single-use plastics. This has been like a thing I've been thinking a lot about. But like putting the onus on the manufacturer who makes it to make sure it doesn't end up in a landfill somewhere would be interesting. But then it also increases the cost of everything, and no good fixes.
Well, and building materials need to come in packaging. It's like that's a hard one to solve. You can't have individual shingles floating around to move them onto the roof or what have you. Is one example. And if anyone has enjoyed cutting open a bag of fiberglass building insulation, the amount of volume it would take up if it were not jammed into that plastic bag. That's perhaps the only good thing about fiberglass building insulation. Our first question comes from Michael, who recently inherited a house in Virginia. Greetings, FHB podcast team. Thank you so much for all the insight you share with us eager listeners every week. I have two questions for you that I'm hoping you'll consider discussing on a future podcast. My wife and I recently inherited a beautiful parcel in an agricultural area of Northern Virginia that is a circa 1958 prefabricated cottage built by long-defunct Lesco Homes, a company that operated out of Martinsville, Virginia. I've attached some photos of the approximately 900 square foot cottage, as well as the 1958 advertisement for the company's Line of the President's catalog of prefabricated homes. I love the line of President's line of homes. That is so fantastic. I wasn't able to figure out which president this one was, but the 60-year-old single-story structure is in desperate need of repair and a major remodel, as the 3 bedrooms are simply too small for modern living and the basement floods quite often. To help us evaluate whether to renovate or entirely replace this home, I wonder if you could share your thoughts on how we could address the leaky basement. As you will see, the CMU walls are bowing inward, presumably due to hydrostatic pressure, causing long linear cracking. I don't know whether or not site-built CMU basements of this era would have included rebar, but perhaps you could speculate on this and how to best prevent future leaks. Okay, so is there rebar in this foundation? My experience would say no. I've never seen rebar in block walls of this era. And they're
Right.
not grouted, right, either, commonly.
Yeah,
That's what
so
I found to be true.
yeah, so the cavities are hollow and there's no rebar.
Ideally, we would avoid the need to excavate the existing grade along the perimeter to install new drain tile and positive side waterproofing, but perhaps this will be unavoidable. Are the CMU basement walls even worth saving, or should we jack up the house and then re-pour the basement walls entirely? I should mention that we plan to remove and seal the interior staircase so that the only future basement access would be from the outdoors using an existing stair, which should help with the thermal envelope and continuous air sealing. Since our plans will essentially convert our basement into a tall crawl space, should we make it unvented by installing a robust vapor barrier inbound of the existing slab and walls, or is this unadvisable given the risk of future water infiltration through existing or new CMU cracks? We're aiming for pretty good house standards on this project, so once the leaking basement is solved, we plan to remove the existing siding and install continuous rigid insulation, hopefully wood fiber insulation board, over the existing 2x4 stud walls, and we'll install a rain screen and new siding. We also hope to install a structural ridge beam so we can vault the ceilings throughout and install rigid insulation of the existing roof sheathing with either an unvented rafter assembly or vented over roof, and install new standing seam or corrugated metal roofing. We will also install new windows, an ERV or HIV, a heat pump water heater, and ductless mini split. We hope to run blower door tests both during and after construction. Okay, one more question here. The particular site is climate zone 4, but we could throw a stone and it would land in climate zone 5. Given the relentless trajectory of climate change, do you and the team feel it best to err upwards or downwards for locations that are on the border between 2 climate zones? I would assume we should stick with climate zone 4, but of course the winters will only get harsher. Keep up the great work. Thank you, Michael. Wow, there's a lot packed in there. How about the second question, or the climate zone question first? Because I think that one's an easier one to answer. Who wants to go first?
I don't think it matters. Whether you're in 4 or 5, you're pretty much insulating and air sealing to the same levels. So it's not going to make much of a difference. And if, depending on how climate change goes in your particular vicinity, whether it's getting colder or harsher winters, or whether you're getting hotter summers, insulation and air sealing are going to benefit you in either case.
I couldn't have said it better myself. How about the basement foundation? What do we do with this? I think it's entirely about budget. How much money do you want to spend? I mean, you could totally redo this with concrete. Yeah, that'd be awesome. But like, is that really necessary? I don't know.
And if he's going for pretty good house standards, introducing new concrete into the equation flips that equation completely.
I would add, if you're going to go to that trouble, like tear the house down and start it over again. Because the amount of remodeling they're talking about anyway, with a new roof and structural ridge and new sheathing and siding and resultant roofing, like you got the better part of a new house anyway, right?
Yeah. So are you arguing that they should tear the house down and build new, or you're saying that if they were going to raise the house and pour a new basement, you might as well build a new house?
That's what I'm saying. I'm
Okay.
saying the latter. And I don't think the block foundation is in any immediate risk of collapsing. And there are companies that do repairs on these kind of projects. Jake Lewandowski jumps to mind. What is he in Michigan?
He's in
Andrew?
Chicago.
Chicago. But he fixes basements all the time with steel I-beams and pilasters and stuff. And this could be fixed. I've even seen people glue carbon fiber to these walls to stop or prevent further movement.
And it may not even be necessary to do a full structural repair, either replacing or reinforcing. A lot of times cracking occurs and it happens at some point in time in history and it doesn't move. So one approach that I would take is to put on, they have strips that you can, like, it's like a tape, but it will actually fracture and you put it over the cracks. And if you get any movement in those cracks, the tape will split and then it visually gives you a cue that something's going on. So if you take care of the exterior water management so that water is not saturating the soil around the house, you're going to get less pressure against the walls, and then monitor the walls. So it takes, good exterior water management, grading, gutters, underground gutters around the perimeter, well-drained soils in the immediate vicinity of the foundation if there aren't already, if you want to go to that excavation stage. But just getting the water away from the house that's falling on the roof may go a long way to reducing future movement of those walls, and then just monitor them and you may be fine.
And that monitoring will be pretty easy because they're not planning to use the basement in any, habitable space sense.
On that subject, Andrew, what do you think about Michael's plan to eliminate the basement staircase and only have access from the outside?
I guess unless it's for like a floor plan thing, the advice would be to like fully encapsulate the basement anyway, air seal it really well, insulate it really well, and then it doesn't seem like you need to move the interior staircase. And the interior staircase will probably be like better energy wise. Like you should completely block off the exterior staircase of the basement would be my guess too.
At least have a weather stripped exterior door, right? And so oftentimes those basement access hatches are poorly detailed and are huge sources of heat and air leakage, heat loss and air leakage. What were you going to say, Mike?
A lot of the homes in small ranch houses that are a little bit larger than the 900 square feet here, there were never any stairs put from the main floor to the basement, primarily because you take up valuable floor space. So if it's a choice of capturing that, maybe 3 foot wide by 6 or 8 feet long space to incorporate with the bedrooms and reconfiguring the interior, it may be a benefit. It sounds like the only thing that would be moved down to the basement or down to there that would need to be accessed regularly would be a washer and dryer, which, it's kind of a pain in the butt to go outside and down in the basement, but that might be the trade-off for the extra few feet or square, of living space. So there's two ways to look at that, I guess.
On the subject of a few feet of living space, in our 700 square foot house, a few feet of living space is a lot, right?
Yeah.
The amount of space that our washer and dryer took up in our kitchen was appreciable and still is. My plan was to put it in the basement. We don't have interior access to our basement. One would have to go outside and through the bulkhead door into the basement to do laundry. Carol said, absolutely not. I'm not doing that. So we're going to figure out a way to put the washer and dryer somewhere because I am not going to go outside with a basket of laundry. And I get it, right? I was convinced.
Yep.
I hope that Michael will keep us posted on the project because it is a beautiful little house in a beautiful part of the country, and it looks like a fun project. I would worry less about the basement, Michael, because it's just for mechanicals. You're not going to go down there. Just spend the money on something you can enjoy instead of yards of concrete would be my final word on that.
As much joy as yards of concrete can bring somebody.
This comes from Adam. Greetings, podcast. I've really come to enjoy the podcast and have been fascinated by the many topics you cover. I'm a committed DIYer, but an electrical engineer by profession. I like to do things right so they will last a long time and perform well, but often find myself getting into highly customized projects that require some deep thinking to figure out. I really appreciate your willingness to recognize DIYers as serious craftspeople who are capable of doing good work. Well, I totally agree with that statement for sure. Mike's nodding his head too, and so is Andrew. What do you think, Jeff?
No, definitely.
It's unanimous.
We also have the luxury of time to do great work.
That's just it.
Yeah.
Especially like these deep energy retrofit projects that I see. Like, you either need a lot of money or you need a lot of time. And yeah.
Or both.
It's cool. Or both. Adam's current project is a 30 by 48 pole barn next to my house in Afton, Minnesota that will serve as both vehicle storage and a metal/wood shop with a room and attic over half the barn for storing all the things that would go in my basement if the house had one. I have laminated columns in the ground just below the frost set in and also buried 2 inches of XPS 2 feet down and 2 feet out around the perimeter. I added a layer of 6-meal poly over the foam and on top of the grade boards, which are double high treated 2x8s, in an attempt to keep the soil under the barn as dry as possible. The slab will be poured later, and I'm planning to put more 2-inch XPS under the concrete and embed PEX tubing for eventual heating, hopefully an expansion of my home's geothermal system. I'm doing all the work myself with the exception of the slab pour. My intention is to keep the interior above freezing through the winters, maybe warmer if I have a project going on, with a possible AC unit in the window for occasional cooling. I'm hoping for a good balance of investment in the building envelope versus energy costs over time. My plan is as follows. I'm planning to use 2x6 girts with 1.5 inches of EPS in between them, with a WRB over the girts and foam overlapping the poly mentioned above with some flashing or something to cover the poly down to grade. 1x4 furring strips over the girts with 3/4 inch fresh milled board and batten siding from Scott's and Red's pines on my property. Oh, red pines, my bad. Scotch pines and red pines on my property. Probably varying the width boards in order to make the most out of the trees. Siding will be screwed in or maybe ring shank galvanized collated framing nails if I can be convinced that they will hold against the cupping pine as it dries. I'm planning to leave about 1 inch between the boards in order to allow the vertical siding to dry behind. I know there are vented furring strips out there that would augment the airflow, but they seem a bit pricey. I'm also considering cutting dado slots into the framing to increase the airflow. What do you guys think? Does this sound like a pretty legit building envelope for a post-frame building? Maybe, Andrew, you can tell us where Afton, Minnesota is in relation to Minneapolis.
So Afton isn't actually all that far from me. It's close to the border of Wisconsin and Minnesota, along, I think it's the St. Croix River is the one that's nearby. A beautiful area. I sort of feel like Adam and I could become fast friends, especially if he had a heated pole barn I could work on my car in.
What do we think about his building? I think I'm jealous.
Yeah.
Say that.
So it sounds like he's doing a frost protected shallow slab foundation, which makes a ton of sense.
And his posts are below frost line too, right? So
it seems great, especially because it's just a shop, that he wants to keep above freezing. I don't know that I would go to the extent of cutting dado slots into furring strips to increase airflow. That seems like a fool's errand, maybe. The one thing I'm stuck on is the EPS between the girts. It's probably okay, but I'd be worried about that level of insulation in a huge building that you're trying to keep heated.
Because of the thermal bridging is not addressed when you're putting the foam only between the girts. Am I correct in okay?
Yep.
It might be good to describe, he uses the term girt, and a lot of people might not be familiar with its use in this situation. Do we have any illustration from Adam or something to kind of put some, to describe it a little better? Are these vertical or horizontal?
Horizontal, and then he's going to put the board and batten siding from his trees cut from the property on that.
That's why I got a little confused, because he's talking about, I presumed it was horizontal, the 2x6s, but then he talked about putting 1x4 over the girts. So that would mean those would run, but he says horizontal 1x4s. So couldn't figure out how he's going to be running. Usually you're going to have verticals, and then you run the 1x4 horizontally with the dados. So I was trying to wrap my head around how these girts are arranged.
I do not have a drawing or a photo from Adam, but I got to assume they're horizontal because the posts are vertical, right? Like how would that work otherwise? And my guess is he wants to just put the foam between the girts to make a smooth plane for his siding to be affixed to, and his WRB, so there's not like waves in the WRB.
So I guess what he's planning is the 2x6s are horizontal. Then he puts the WRB on over that.
Furring.
And then the furring is directly over each of those 2x6s with the slots in it. There's dados. Okay, that makes sense now.
So this is a really complicated assembly for what amounts to a giant shop. Do you guys think so too?
It's a lot of work. Yeah.
It
and
is
maybe
a
unnecessary
lot of work.
expense.
Yeah.
Would you just put the siding right on top of the WRB, Mike, Andrew, Jeff?
It's always nice to have a little vent space. So even though he mentions putting the dado for drainage, I remember an article many years ago, and I don't remember where it was. It was by Paul and Eldon Camp, where he had taken apart like an 85-year-old building that had horizontal furring strips with cedar shingles over it. And it convinced him, due to how well the shingles had performed, that even though there was no continuous vent path, that just having that airspace and the little bit of air that moves through really did a benefit. And as Adam mentioned, when he puts the board and batten siding vertically, he's going to leave a 1-inch airspace between the boards and then put the batten over it. So I think there'll be enough little bit of airflow that wouldn't need the dado, as Andrew pointed out. So,
Adam, I think you might want to explore one of these drainable house wraps as your WRB, and that would save the expense and time of putting all the furring on, which is, in my mind, kind of redundant with the horizontal girts. But it doesn't dry as well as the airspace by any measure.
It does sound like he has a relatively unlimited supply of wood if he's cutting pine locally on his property and milling it.
What about going with a reverse board and batten?
Oh, and then that's your airspace?
Yeah.
Oh,
that's a good
brilliant.
idea. Yeah.
Oh. Jeff, I'm going to ask that you be in charge of our technical questions from now on. No, that's a great suggestion.
Mm-hmm.
So we should explain to folks, ordinarily boards go, and then you cover the seams with a batten on the outside. Jeff's method is to put the batten up first and then put the boards on top. And it hides the gap and allows for seasonal expansion and contraction, but also creates a space because the board is off the sheathing layer, or WRB, by the thickness of the batten. So I think that's a great idea.
And for those who aren't familiar with what board and batten means, is the boards are fairly wide, might be 8 inches to 14-inch wide boards, and the battens are maybe 2 to 3 inches wide, so they're narrower strips of the same wood. So
I love the look, and I love the thought of using siding made from trees on the property. That's really, really cool.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I would go with the screws.
You
He's
would?
considering, yeah, I would, particularly if it's going to be sawn, not dried, and then going to be installing it fairly, within a few weeks or months of it being sawn without stack drying it. And then with water getting on it and this, moisture absorbing in, if it's going to be flat grain sawn, wider boards are going to tend to cup a little bit. So the little extra effort for putting the screws in will probably be worth it. You can get collated
A little
screws and
extra
just screw
effort?
them.
That's going to take days. Are you kidding me? That's so many
Well,
screws. This
he's
is a
doing it
huge
himself.
building.
So let's back up to one of our earlier commenter, who said, DIYers, DIYers and the craftsmanship that they can do on their own
This is
projects.
Adam. That's Adam who said that. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's, DIYers, they've got the time, they want to do it right. And if you want to do it right, that's what I would do if I was building my own house, I guess is the way to put it. I would use screws.
So I used ring shank siding nails to put my shiplapped vertical siding on my building, and none of those nails have come out. And it's directly on the WRB layer. There's not even an airspace. I did back prime them all. I primed all the cuts. So I think that gives a little more stability than if they were bare wood on one side and painted on the other. But I haven't had any nails pop.
How wide are those shiplap boards?
They range from like 4 inches to probably 14 inches. Some
Okay,
are pretty
so-
big. Yeah.
Okay, you've convinced me then. If
Were
you're
they-
getting
were
up
they
to
dried?
14 inches with the boards, then.
I'm sorry, Jeff?
Were they dried before you?
They were kiln dried, so
Yeah,
maybe
so
that
that's
has a lot
that
to
makes
do
a
with
difference.
it. Yeah. It was also from a very old tree, which I'm guessing these Scotch and red pines are probably not as old as, what was a 2-foot diameter white pine tree. Once again, I hope Adam will keep me posted on this, because this also sounds like an amazing project. And Andrew, you need a new friend, right, with a bigger shop.
I'm not allowed to help on other people's DIY projects until I finish my own at home, but I would be happy to take some of my work time, daytime hours to go check out your project, Adam.
Our next question comes from Walter. Hey, podcast crew. In episode 529, Mike Girton repaired his in-laws' rotted door jamb with formed Bondo. I am facing this repair, and so I am wondering if there is a video or other resource that gives the details. The sill is now held together by deceptively intact paint film, and I'm expecting rot. When I searched for door jamb on Fine Homebuilding site, the closest match was to Mike's story. There is an adjoining side light with a sill that also needs to be replaced. Predictions about what lies beneath? More about forms of Bondo and any suggestions would be great. I'm not in the trades, but I am retired and curious. Even before the acute shortage of crafty people due to the virus, it was getting hard to find good help. So I've been taking a first swipe at everything that doesn't require going up a ladder. I've been a subscriber to FHB for years, and I've listened to all the podcasts. I've learned a lot. With Kylie not around so much lately, I miss the feminine voice. You've had a number of competent women on Pro Talk. Maybe one of them would volunteer. Well, I would love to have more women hosts of the show. Kylie's going to be on more regularly that she's established in her new digs. So thanks for those suggestions, Walter. And rotted door jams. This is like what keeps everyday carpenters in business. Am I right, Mike?
It can be that, and window sills as well. Yeah. And paint films, as Walter points out, are really good at concealing the decay that's occurring underneath. And I've seen painters, particularly on houses that are just about to go on the market. The homeowner knows that a paint refresh will help, and the painters just paint over
Rot.
the rot that's already there. I went and a friend of my wife is purchasing a house, and she was going to have a home inspection done, but she asked me to go take a look, and I didn't even need a screwdriver and all to figure out all of the jams on the windows, doors, and thresholds and so on that were rotted. I just used my finger, and you could push right through that paint film.
Every carpenter is immediately suspect of wood windows and doors from a period of like what 10 to 20 to 30 years old, right? It seems like older stuff is more reliable than the stuff from the 80s and early 90s especially.
Can be. So there have been a number of articles in Fine Home Building over the years. I think when Walter did a search, he put in door jam, a good search on the website term. Good, instead of using door jam, use rot repair, and you'll come
Mm-hmm.
up with articles. And rot repair in one, like a corner board or in siding, is going to be pretty much the same on doing a simple door jam. And there have been articles by Tom O'Brien, by Andy Angle, by John Michael Davis, and others in the magazine over the years that give a good array of different methods, both hardcore methods with consolidants and actually structurally repairing the rot, as opposed to just doing a fill like I did with Bondo. So different methods that can be used.
I
But
was
as
going to
Walter,
Mike
ask.
Davis, I had the pleasure to visit in New Orleans, and I know he's retired, but his knowledge of repairing, especially old wood, beautiful homes with these products was amazing to witness. He stored his like epoxy in these military vacuum canisters, right? Because if they're moisture cured products,
Yeah.
you live in New Orleans, you can't leave them in your apartment. You, his knowledge was just staggering, and it was a joy to hang out with him. And I would say if you want a hard place to deal with wood, New Orleans would be it.
Is there a threshold for like repair versus replacement? Like I know replacing individual parts of a door jamb or a window, like the amount of labor involved is pretty significant. Any rules of thumb or guidance there from either of you?
I had the exact same thought, and it's like, where do you draw the line on, where, how far do you want to go with a repair when actually a better solution is going to be to replace either a full jam or replace the threshold? And it really, to me, comes down to what are the structural parts of that frame that are integral to the door operating properly.
Mm-hmm.
And so in the case of my father-in-law's, it was just a small corner of the wood door jamb, and it was the hinge side which was screwed into the jack stud. Whereas Walter mentions a side light. So if you have a door with a side light and that side light is on the hinge side of the door, then that mullion piece, that becomes structural to both the skylight and the door hinges, and you don't have a jack stud behind it that can support the door jamb above where you've replaced a rot. So in that case, if the threshold or that jamb in the mullion is rotted, you really got to do a structural replacement, which means taking the whole thing apart and rebuilding it. So it's on a case by case basis, I guess, is the short answer there.
The material to fix an entry door with a side light is a fraction of the cost of buying a new door and a side light. And sometimes it's a hassle, but it's what, thousands of dollars probably to buy a
Oh
fancy
yeah.
door with side lights now, right?
Mm-hmm.
I kind of like the rot repair stuff as a carpenter, like what you're dealing with largely. I mean, oftentimes you find framing damaged and weird stuff behind, but like if you're just fixing sill nosings or the corner board is rotted on the bottom, those are easy repairs, and you're saving a house, and I think that's pretty cool.
Allows you to be a little bit of a superhero, I guess.
And it's like fixing stuff prevents it from getting worse. You know, once you've sealed up that jam with Bondo and painted it, like, I think you've arrested the rot largely. You might have infiltration from above or whatever getting on it, but now it's plastic. It's polyester. It's not going to rot again. What do you think, Jeff? Makes sense to replace or repair? Mixed bag.
I think certainly a mixed bag. I mean, I did a lot of repair on my house. Still need more to do more, but because sometimes when you try and replace parts, you open up a can of worms because of how things are layered, and you wind up having to rip off a lot more than you actually need to replace.
Mike, as
That's
an
so
example,
true.
how long did it take you to fix that jam versus how long would it have taken you to put a new door in, make new extension jams, or put them on and case it and, you know, have it installed?
Yeah, the repair was a matter of maybe 35 minutes, 40 minutes. And to replace, pull the door out, go and get a door, with the full jam and put it back in. It would have taken, a few hours to do it right and flash it all in.
I guess there's no good answer. I mean, do you guys have final thoughts on this? Like, how do you know?
This is Patrick. You mentioned that this is something that a lot of people enjoy doing. Because you see what the task is in front of you and you do it. But as Jeff pointed out, once you start digging into it, there might be more involved. So you might get in over your head for what you think might be a half-hour project, and it might be an all-day project as you start to get into it. So it's just so hard to know. Rot is just. It's rotten to deal with.
Rot is rotten, Mike Gerton. I love that. Yeah. So the other thing I always think about when I'm approaching any repair on my home is this an opportunity to make my house significantly better if I'm already doing this work? And so it's like, if this front door is also leaky and, doesn't perform well and you'd like a better looking one anyway, it's like that's also the privilege of a DIYer to think strategically about your home and the improvements you're making on it versus hiring somebody to fix this rot repair. They'll fix this rot and move on.
I agree with one caveat, and that's on a historic home or a historical home, as Sam reminded us this morning. I think it's more important to save the fabric of a historical home than it is to have an air-efficient door. And I think that's open to debate, but that's me. What do you think, gents, Jeff and Mike, about, like, is it worth improving the energy efficiency at the expense of a historic element of a historic home?
I'm trying to think, other than windows or doors, what other historical elements that would be on a house that you'd need
Shutters.
to preserve it versus improving the performance in some way. It pretty much boils down to windows and doors, for me anyway. And in those cases, there are incremental improvements you can do to windows and doors with some good interlocking, gasketing, particularly. Maybe not, replacing the glazing. Now that, of course, is a no-no if you want to, if you got some historical glazing on there. But there are ways to at least get the little better air tightness out of older windows and doors.
Well, I hope that Walter will send a photo of his repair, because it seemed like he was going to try and repair it, and I think that's going to be complicated with the side light, but this is doable, Walter. Don't worry about it. Start taking stuff apart. Well, I am looking forward to our conversation about tour organization and storage. It's been at the front of my mind, as you might imagine, lately. So I'm anxious to hear what you all think about that subject. And I'll share a photograph I took of John Beer's work van, which is a dazzling display of sustainers. The lumberyard doesn't have as many sustainers as John Beer does in his truck, I'm pretty sure. Any final notes before we part company, fellas?
Just a reminder that if you want to listen to this after show, I'd encourage you to become a member of the Fine Homebuilding community. Membership gets you access to our entire archive. So when Mike rattles off a bunch of authors and article titles, you can actually find them. And then also gets you access to the after show and a bunch of other great stuff. It also helps us keep the lights on and keep the podcast going. So we really appreciate all the members who are listening. And I look forward to talking more tools and tool storage on the after show.
Well, we'll see you all there, I hope. Unfortunately, that is all the time we have today for the regular podcast, but thanks to Mike and Andrew and Jeff for joining me, and thanks to all of you for listening. Please remember to send us your comments, questions, and suggestions to fhbpodcast@taunton.com. And please like, comment, or review us however you're listening. It helps other folks find our podcast. Stay safe, everybody. Keep craft alive. Happy building. Thanks very much for listening.